I had always believed that family meant belonging, that no matter what storms life threw your way, your family was your safe harbor, your place of refuge. I clung to this belief throughout my 62 years, each one marked by quiet sacrifice and devotion to my only son, Alex. I had poured my heart and soul into raising him, holding down multiple jobs, clipping coupons by lamplight, and stitching together the pieces of a life that always seemed just beyond our grasp. If you're watching this, subscribe and let me know where you are watching from. When Alex married Hannah, a vibrant young woman whose presence filled any room she entered, I felt a surge of hope. Perhaps, I thought, our family would finally blossom into something warm and complete. And when they announced plans to settle down, I didn't hesitate to offer them the old Victorian house I'd purchased years earlier, with my entire savings, an elegant yet worn-down home nestled among ancient oaks in the tranquil outskirts of Savannah. I dreamed of this house becoming the heart of our expanding family, a place filled with grandchildren's laughter and Sunday dinners gathered around my sturdy oak table. Yet dreams are fragile things, easily shattered by careless words and silences that speak louder than any shout. On a warm, jasmine-scented evening, I found myself in the kitchen preparing dinner, roast chicken seasoned just as Alex always loved, potatoes roasting gently, and freshly baked bread cooling on the counter. Hannah had mentioned casually that her parents were visiting again, but as was often the case, I found out only hours before. Still, I didn't complain. I moved quietly through the rooms, dusting, tidying, ensuring every corner sparkled. After all, the house had to be perfect. When the doorbell chimed, the echo reverberated through my chest. I straightened my apron and hurried to greet Hannah's parents, Carol and Robert, whose confident presence always made me feel small, like a shadow dancing quietly behind their brightness. "Margaret," Carol acknowledged with a faint nod, eyes scanning my appearance briefly before stepping past me. Dinner began smoothly enough. Crystal glasses clinked softly, laughter punctuated the room, jazz music wafted gently through the air, mingling with the savory aroma of herbs I'd nurtured in my garden. I sat at the edge of the table, sipping water quietly, smiling occasionally, content merely to watch my son bask in the glow of the family he'd built. Then came the moment that would forever alter my place in that house. Carol, pausing between bites, glanced casually around the beautifully arranged dining room, her gaze finally settling on me with mild curiosity. "And who exactly is Margaret?" she asked Hannah softly, though loud enough for everyone to hear. A silence settled over the table, brief but potent. My heart quickened as I instinctively looked toward Alex, awaiting the prideful declaration of who I truly was. Instead, Hannah laughed lightly, her voice a sweet poison. "Oh, Margaret," she said casually, her smile perfectly poised. "She's our unofficial maid. Keeps everything running smoothly around here." The room erupted into laughter, amused and oblivious. I felt the color drain from my face, and my chest tightened, each breath shallow and painful. But the deepest cut came not from Hannah's careless cruelty, nor from Carol's approving smile, but from the deafening silence of Alex, who merely smiled weakly and looked down at his plate. I sat frozen for a moment, my gaze fixed upon the polished mahogany table I'd bought at a yard sale and lovingly restored myself. The house, the furniture, the paintings on the walls all bore the mark of my efforts, the imprint of my love and labor. Yet, in one cruel instant, I had become invisible, insignificant, merely the help. The laughter subsided, conversation resumed, but I heard none of it. Slowly, silently, I stood, gathering empty dishes with hands that trembled slightly. No one seemed to notice as I quietly slipped into the kitchen, the sound of my footsteps drowned by their continued chatter and laughter. Standing alone by the sink, I stared blankly at the darkness outside the window, my heart pounding in irregular rhythm. The ache I felt wasn't anger or humiliation, it was an emptiness so profound it seemed bottomless. I had poured my life into this family, willingly faded into the background to let them shine, and now it was painfully clear that my sacrifices had been taken for granted, invisible to those who should have cherished them most. That night, As voices drifted up from downstairs, carefree and unaware, I sat on the edge of my bed, the one piece of furniture that truly felt mine, and finally allowed myself to cry. Silent, wrenching tears that carried with them years of bottled-up hurt, of neglect quietly endured in the name of love. When dawn finally crept softly through the lace curtains, I rose with a newfound clarity, a quiet resolve burning steadily within me. I made coffee as always, fed Hannah's indifferent cat, and placed the keys to every door of that grand Victorian house onto the kitchen counter. Hannah appeared soon after, clad in yoga attire, phone in hand, barely acknowledging my presence. "What's this?" she asked, eyebrows knitted slightly as she lifted the keys. "They're yours," I said gently, calmly meeting her confused stare. "Good luck with the mortgage." I walked past her bewildered expression, past family photos I'd carefully framed, past furniture I'd chosen and restored. I took only my purse, my coat, the same one I'd worn decades earlier, bringing Alex home from the hospital, and opened the door softly. "Mom?" Alex's voice called uncertainly from behind. I didn't stop, didn't turn. My footsteps remained steady, even as he followed barefoot onto the driveway, calling my name again. But I kept walking toward my car, toward freedom from the invisible role I'd played far too long. As I pulled away, I caught a brief glimpse of Alex standing helplessly in the driveway, staring after me with shock. My heart ached, but beneath the pain, there was also the quiet, firm resolve of a woman who finally understood her worth. In the rearview mirror, the house grew smaller, fading slowly into the distance, along with the ghostly echoes of laughter and humiliation. I didn't know exactly where I was headed, only that my place was no longer there, in that house where I'd given everything, yet had somehow become nothing. Driving away, the morning sunlight washed gently over me, whispering softly of beginnings and endings. I drew a steady breath, gripping the wheel tighter, not out of fear, but from newfound strength. Because sometimes, the only way to reclaim your place in the world is to leave the place that no longer values who you are. As I drove away from that familiar street lined with towering oaks, each turn of the wheels felt heavier, yet strangely liberating. The early morning air was cool, and the golden rays breaking through the clouds bathed the quiet roads of Savannah in a gentle glow. I didn't look back, afraid the sight of Alex standing stunned in the driveway might weaken my resolve. The decision had been made, and there was no room for hesitation. Arriving at my old friend Elaine's small cottage near the outskirts of town, I took a deep breath before stepping out of the car. Elaine, whom I'd known since high school, opened the door with a look of surprise quickly replaced by quiet understanding. Without words, she wrapped me in a comforting embrace, knowing instinctively that something profound had shifted. We sat together in her kitchen, the worn tabletop between us littered with cups of steaming coffee and untouched muffins. Elaine listened quietly as I recounted the previous night's events, the laughter, the careless words, and worst of all, Alex's deafening silence. The story flowed from me, releasing years of suppressed disappointments and hidden sorrows. I always thought that if I just kept giving, kept sacrificing, someday they'd see, I whispered, tracing circles on the table with my fingertip. Elaine reached across, covering my hand with hers, her eyes filled with compassion and gentle strength. "You've done enough, Margaret. Perhaps too much," she murmured softly. "It's time you let yourself breathe." Days passed quietly in Elaine's small cottage. Each morning, I'd wake with the unfamiliar sensation of freedom, tempered by a lingering ache deep within my chest. I busied myself with small tasks, gardening, baking, helping Elaine sort through boxes of memories she'd stored away in her attic. But no matter how busy I kept myself, my thoughts inevitably drifted back to the Victorian house and the family I'd left behind. One afternoon, as rain drummed steadily against the window panes, my phone buzzed on the kitchen table. I glanced down, heart stuttering at the sight of Alex's name flashing across the screen. My finger hovered uncertainly, but in the end, I let it go unanswered, the vibrating slowly ceasing along with the ache in my heart. He left a voicemail, his voice strained and pleading. "Mom, please, let's talk. Hannah is upset and I don't understand what happened." Just come home. But that was the problem. It had never truly felt like home, not for me. Home was supposed to be where you felt safe, valued, not diminished into a silent shadow, easily dismissed. I had spent 2 decades pouring my soul into those walls, only to become invisible within them. Later that evening, unable to rest, I found myself rummaging through the small bag I had packed in haste. There, folded carefully at the bottom, was the old coat I'd worn on the day I brought Alex home from the hospital, a simple, worn fabric that held the memories of a mother's hope and dreams. I pressed the coat close, inhaling the faint scent of lavender sachets I'd once tucked into the pockets. A part of me wanted to weep, to mourn the lost dreams, but I held my tears at bay. It was time to heal, not to grieve. The following morning, Elaine handed me a newspaper over coffee. "Perhaps it's time you start thinking about what's next," she said gently. My eyes skimmed over the classifieds, job postings, apartment rentals possibilities I'd never seriously considered before now. The idea of starting over at 62 was daunting, but strangely exhilarating. It felt as if life was offering me a second chance, a clean page upon which to rewrite my story. That night, as twilight softened the sky, I drove slowly past the Victorian house one last time. Lights were glowing softly from within, shadows moving gently across curtains I'd hung myself. For a brief moment, I considered going back, telling Alex everything could return to normal. But normal had been suffocating, and returning to it would only perpetuate a cycle I was determined to break. Instead, I wrote a simple note, placing it carefully into the mailbox. "Good luck with the mortgage. I hope you find in this house the happiness and peace I once dreamed we'd share." With that, I returned to my car, refusing to look back, even when I heard footsteps rushing out, Alex's voice calling desperately through the darkness. "Mom, please, wait." His voice carried anguish, regret, a desperate plea that tore at my heart. Yet, my resolve remained firm. I had waited a lifetime for acknowledgement, for appreciation, but it had come too late. The road ahead was uncertain, but it was mine to travel, free from the burdens of unspoken sacrifices. I drove away slowly, deliberately, the headlights illuminating the quiet street, each mile taking me further from the woman who had willingly disappeared into the background. I had no clear destination yet, but for the first time in years, I felt genuinely alive, fully present in my own life. As I reached the edge of town, Savannah's familiar silhouettes faded into darkness, replaced by the soft glow of stars scattered across the vast night sky. I pulled over briefly, stepping from the car to breathe deeply, feeling the cool night air fill my lungs with clarity and quiet strength. No matter how uncertain the future, one thing was clear. The keys I had left behind were not just to the house, but to an old life, one defined by silence and self-neglect. I had handed over those keys willingly, knowing it was the first step toward reclaiming my voice, my dignity, and ultimately, myself. Asheville greeted me with a gentle drizzle that softened the edges of the distant mountains, cloaking them in mist. The drive had been long, filled with stretches of silence, broken only by the hum of tires against wet pavement. The closer I got to Aunt Ruth's old house, the stronger the pull of nostalgia became, mingled with an undeniable sense of uncertainty. The small, quaint cottage stood nestled among tall pines, hidden from the main road by lush foliage and vibrant wildflowers. It had belonged to Aunt Ruth, my mother's older sister, a fiercely independent woman whose life had been shrouded in quiet mystery. Ruth had passed away several years ago, leaving the property in my care. I had almost forgotten about it until this moment when the keys trembled slightly in my hand as I unlocked the front door. Inside, the air felt heavy with memories and the lingering scent of dried herbs and old wood. Dust motes danced lazily in the pale sunlight streaming through lace curtains yellowed by age. Everything remained just as Ruth had left it, furniture draped in sheets, faded photographs adorning the walls, a sense of peaceful solitude permeating every corner. I spent the first few days cleaning and settling in, each action an attempt to quiet my restless heart. Nights were the hardest. Loneliness crept in with the shadows, filling the rooms with echoes of regret and doubt. I found myself pacing aimlessly, sleep elusive, thoughts circling endlessly around Alex, around everything I'd left behind. One dreary afternoon, restless and driven by an urge to escape my spiraling thoughts, I climbed the narrow staircase leading to the attic. I hoped organizing Ruth's forgotten belongings might offer a distraction, some small comfort. The attic was dimly lit, crowded with boxes, old trunks, and covered furniture. Cobwebs clung stubbornly to every corner, and the musty scent of decades past filled my lungs. My eyes fell upon a large metal trunk tucked away in a far corner. Its surface was coated with dust, the lock rusted shut. Curiosity stirred within me. With effort, I managed to pry it open, its hinges protesting loudly against years of disuse. Inside were bundles of yellowed papers and envelopes tied with faded ribbons, a collection of Ruth's belongings, carefully preserved yet forgotten. My fingers brushed over a particular envelope bearing my name in Ruth's familiar handwriting. Heart racing, I gently opened it, revealing pages filled with Ruth's neat, precise script and several official-looking documents. The words blurred momentarily as disbelief and confusion clouded my vision. Slowly, the truth emerged from Ruth's careful notes and meticulously preserved hospital records. Alex was not my biological son. Ruth, who had spent her life working as a nurse at the hospital where Alex was born, had uncovered a hospital error, a tragic mix-up involving two newborns. Her letters explained how she discovered the mistake years after it had occurred, burdened by the knowledge she was too afraid to reveal. Ruth had hoped I would never need to know, yet had preserved the evidence just in case. My hands trembled as I reread the documents repeatedly, each time hoping somehow the words might change, though deep down, I knew their truth was undeniable. The realization hit like a physical blow, forcing me to sit heavily on a dusty chair. Alex, the child I had raised, loved, and sacrificed everything for, was not biologically mine. For a long while, I sat frozen, emotions battling fiercely within me: shock, sadness, betrayal, and surprisingly, relief. Relief because, for the first time, the immense weight of self-doubt, the relentless guilt of perceived maternal failure, began to lift. Perhaps the chasm that had always existed between Alex and me, the silent misunderstandings and endless disappointments, now had an explanation. It wasn't entirely my failure. It was the tragic consequence of circumstances beyond my control. Yet, alongside the relief was a growing ache, an emptiness caused by the questions that now filled my mind. Who was my biological child? Where was he now? Had he been raised with the love and security I had desperately tried to provide Alex? Or had he suffered because of this cruel twist of fate? That night, wrapped in an old quilt that still smelled faintly of Ruth's lavender soap, I reread the documents beneath the soft glow of a solitary lamp. Questions burned within me, a newfound determination taking root. My life had shifted again, my identity as a mother altered irrevocably. Yet, rather than despair, I felt strangely empowered by the truth, by the possibility of discovering my lost child. Outside, rain continued softly against the window panes, the rhythmic tapping a comforting backdrop to my swirling thoughts. In the quiet solitude of Ruth's cottage, amidst shadows and whispered memories, I made a silent vow. I would uncover the full truth, confront the past without fear, and perhaps find a way to heal the wounds I'd carried for far too long. In embracing the darkness, I felt strangely closer to finding my own light. In the days following my startling discovery, I became consumed with the need for answers. Each morning, I rose early, fueled by a restless energy that propelled me forward. The cottage, once silent and peaceful, now buzzed with the hum of my determination. With every cup of coffee, every restless pacing across creaky wooden floors, my resolve strengthened I would find my true son. My search began quietly, discreetly. I scoured public records, local news archives, and social media profiles, following clues from Ruth's meticulous notes. Eventually, I uncovered a name: Daniel Bennett, a man whose birth date matched the very day Alex was born. My heart quickened as I pieced together fragments of his life, a life that had unfolded parallel to mine, yet remained utterly unknown until now. Daniel Bennett owned and operated a popular bookstore, Bennett's Books, located in the heart of downtown Asheville. Reviews described the shop as cozy, welcoming a place where book lovers gathered to find rare editions and share stories over cups of coffee. Daniel himself was portrayed as knowledgeable, kind, and respected within the community. Each description filled me with cautious hope, a longing to see for myself the man he had become. One cool afternoon, heart-pounding, I ventured into Asheville's bustling downtown district. Pedestrians wandered leisurely, window shopping beneath colorful awnings and chatting over pastries and coffee. My gaze locked on the charming storefront of Bennett's Books, its windows framed by climbing ivy and adorned with hand-painted lettering. My breathing quickened. I hesitated momentarily, fear mingling with anticipation, before slipping silently into a shadowed alleyway across the street, hidden yet perfectly positioned to observe. From my quiet vantage point, I caught my first glimpse of Daniel through the shop window. He moved gracefully among the bookshelves, assisting customers with an easy, genuine smile. The faint sound of his laughter reached me, warm and inviting, tugging gently at my heart. He seemed effortlessly comfortable, his interactions natural and sincere, a reflection of someone at peace with themselves and their place in the world. As I watched, a wave of intense recognition washed over me, sudden and undeniable. His dark hair, slightly tousled, the confident way he moved, the thoughtful tilt of his head, each detail drew me closer to him, bridging the distance between stranger and kin. My breath caught sharply in my chest when he turned slightly, revealing eyes remarkably similar to mine, the same shade of soft hazel flecked with amber. A profound surge of emotion overwhelmed me, and I felt hot tears silently streaking down my cheeks, a silent cry releasing decades of unspoken yearning. Minutes passed unnoticed as I stood frozen, lost in the revelation of this truth, this son, unknown and yet somehow familiar, who had been unknowingly close all these years. The realization filled me with bittersweet joy and sorrow. Daniel appeared happy, fulfilled, loved by the community he'd created around himself. Had my absence from his life been a blessing in disguise, or had he, too, sensed an unspoken absence, a quiet longing he couldn't name? Days turned into weeks, and my discreet visits became a comforting routine. I'd choose an inconspicuous bench or quiet corner in a nearby cafe, watching Daniel through the window, my heart filling with quiet pride as I observed his kindness, his gentle interactions, his thoughtful gestures. Each glimpse deepened the invisible thread that bound us together, reinforcing the instinctual bond of a mother recognizing her child. Yet, despite my profound yearning to approach Daniel, caution held me back. How could I explain the truth without disrupting his life, without causing confusion or pain? Would my revelation shatter the foundations of the identity he'd so carefully built? Fearful of disturbing the careful balance he had established, I chose to remain hidden a little longer, observing silently from the shadows. One afternoon, as rain tapped gently against the cobblestone streets, I entered Bennett's Books, my heart racing. Shelves filled with cherished volumes surrounded me, each book whispering untold stories and offering silent companionship. Daniel stood near the counter, engrossed in conversation with an elderly customer. I browsed quietly nearby, the nearness of him causing my pulse to quicken, a poignant longing pressing against my chest. Then, unexpectedly, Daniel turned, his gaze meeting mine briefly. A warm, genuine smile lit his face, his hazel eyes reflecting gentle curiosity and kindness. "Good afternoon," he greeted softly, his voice rich and comforting. "Finding everything all right?" Words caught painfully in my throat. I managed a trembling nod, my smile tentative yet filled with heartfelt emotion. "Yes, thank you," I murmured softly, my voice nearly a whisper. He inclined his head, a subtle recognition sparking momentarily in his eyes. "Let me know if I can help you find anything." As Daniel moved away, assisting another customer, I felt warmth blooming gently within me, a fragile yet profound connection made in that simple exchange. Tears pricked again at the corners of my eyes, but this time they held a trace of hope. Quietly, I left the bookstore, carrying with me the promise of future possibilities, the gentle reassurance that perhaps, somehow, there might be room for me in his world. I knew the journey ahead would require patience, courage, and honesty, yet I was determined to walk this uncertain path. The shadows no longer felt daunting, for within them, I had glimpsed the beginning of a hopeful new chapter, illuminated softly by the presence of the true sun I'd finally found. Having glimpsed Daniel, I felt a newfound strength. Yet, as I navigated this uncertain new chapter, memories of Alex and Hannah tugged persistently at my thoughts. I couldn't ignore a lingering responsibility to understand the life I'd left behind fully. Driven by an urge to uncover the truths I'd long ignored, I quietly began investigating Alex and Hannah's lives from afar. My initial inquiries, subtle yet determined, soon uncovered unsettling realities. Hannah's seemingly successful lifestyle consultancy, celebrated on social media, was little more than an elaborate illusion, a carefully curated facade maintained by mounting debts and empty promises. Beneath glossy posts and cheerful videos, her clients turned out to be fictitious personas crafted to attract more followers, sponsorships, and investments. I spent days meticulously documenting my findings in a leather-bound notebook, detailing each piece of evidence with precision. Financial records showed overdue bills, maxed-out credit cards, and accumulating debts that painted a troubling portrait of a couple living far beyond their means. Each revelation deepened my sorrow and disappointment, but also fueled my resolve to confront their destructive pretense. In the stillness of Aunt Ruth's cottage, beneath the glow of a desk lamp, I carefully chronicled the truth I'd uncovered. Alex, once hopeful and earnest, had become complicit in Hannah's superficial world, willingly blind to the consequences of their lies. Anger stirred within me, not merely from betrayal, but from profound sadness at the emptiness behind their polished smiles. I continued to observe quietly, building a case not out of malice, but out of necessity. Perhaps they needed to be shaken awake, to recognize the genuine value of authenticity, humility, and honest labor. The thought filled me with both determination and anxiety. Could they handle the harsh lesson they were unwittingly begging for? One afternoon, as golden sunlight filtered through the old cottage windows, I received a call from a trusted attorney, a longtime family friend. After a thoughtful discussion about the ethics and consequences of my intentions, he agreed to assist me discreetly. Together, we compiled extensive documentation of Alex and Hannah's precarious finances, false advertising, and online manipulations. Despite my methodical approach, moments of uncertainty still plagued me. Would this confrontation heal or harm? My heart wavered between maternal protection and the painful acknowledgement that silence was no longer kindness, it was complicity. I reassured myself repeatedly. Their carefully constructed lie was a fragile bubble, bound to burst sooner or later. Better that it happened now, guided gently by a hand that still held love beneath the disappointment. Days passed, and I continued visiting Bennett's books, drawing comfort from observing Daniel's genuine warmth and integrity. Each encounter reinforced my conviction. Daniel represented truth, humility, and strength, the virtues I had long admired and had hoped to instill in Alex. Finally, the day arrived when my careful preparations culminated into action. I instructed the attorney to quietly forward an anonymous dossier containing all our gathered evidence directly to Alex and Hannah, along with a carefully worded note urging them to confront reality and reclaim their lives from deception. From a distance, I witnessed the subtle collapse of their fabricated empire. Social media accounts abruptly paused, then resumed hesitantly, stripped of their previous confidence. Hannah's online presence shifted visibly, her tone cautious, uncertain. Rumors circulated, whispering suspicions among their followers. Sponsors and partnerships began to quietly withdraw, sensing instability beneath the glossy exterior. Alex attempted several desperate calls, pleading voicemails echoing with confusion and fear. Despite the ache each message caused, I maintained my silence, convinced that my absence would prompt necessary introspection. They needed space and silence to truly understand the extent of their mistakes. Yet, even in this quiet satisfaction, a gentle sadness persisted. I recognized Alex's voice trembling with vulnerability, reminiscent of the child he once was, innocent, eager, and trusting. My heart yearned to comfort him, but I remained steadfast, knowing his path toward genuine growth required confronting this bitter truth alone. Through it all, I continued to document every step, every reaction, every subtle change. Each notation served as a testament to my unwavering belief in accountability, authenticity, and the power of facing one's mistakes openly. Late one evening, as the sun dipped low beyond Asheville's mountainous horizon, I closed the notebook carefully, feeling a profound sense of clarity. This painful journey, born from betrayal and secrecy, had become an unexpected path to self-awareness, not just for Alex and Hannah, but for myself as well. I had spent a lifetime behind my own mask, concealing hurt, silencing truths, and suppressing my identity to please others. Now, as the twilight filled the small room, I felt lighter, unburdened by secrets, and hopeful for the future. True healing, I realized, began only when the mask slipped away, revealing courage, authenticity, and humility. In that quiet moment, I understood that this lesson wasn't just for Alex and Hannah, it was for me too. And finally, I felt ready to step confidently forward, embracing the truth that awaited. The morning light in Asheville always carried a special kind of softness, gently filtering through drifting clouds and settling gracefully over rooftops and cobblestone streets. On one such morning, filled with anticipation and quiet resolve, I found myself standing once again outside Bennett's Books. This time, however, I wouldn't remain on the sidelines. Taking a deep breath to steady my nerves, I stepped through the door, greeted warmly by the familiar scent of books mingled with the comforting aroma of fresh coffee. Inside, Daniel was behind the counter, absorbed in organizing a display of new arrivals. At the gentle chime of the bell, he glanced up, a welcoming smile spreading effortlessly across his face. "Good morning, nice to see you again," he greeted warmly. "Good morning," I replied softly, my voice steadier than I felt. "I thought it was about time I properly explored your lovely shop." "I'm glad you did," Daniel said, eyes twinkling warmly. "Feel free to take your time. If you need any recommendations, I'm here." With a grateful nod, I wandered leisurely among the shelves, allowing myself to relax into the comforting presence of countless stories waiting to be discovered. As I browsed, I occasionally caught Daniel's watchful gaze, filled with a gentle curiosity and genuine warmth. Over the next several weeks, I became a frequent visitor. Daniel and I exchanged book recommendations, discussed favorite authors, and slowly built a gentle camaraderie rooted in shared appreciation for stories and their power to heal and connect. Each visit to Bennett's Books felt increasingly like stepping into a welcoming sanctuary, and Daniel's thoughtful conversations eased my lingering anxieties and uncertainties. One rainy afternoon, as droplets tapped rhythmically against the bookstore's windows, Daniel approached with 2 steaming cups of tea, extending one toward me with a friendly smile. "Care to join me?" "I thought we might discuss our latest reads," he suggested warmly. I accepted gratefully, settling into a cozy nook near the window, where we soon became engrossed in conversation about literature and life. Daniel's thoughtful insights and empathetic listening resonated deeply, confirming my earlier impression of his integrity and kindness. "You know," Daniel remarked thoughtfully, leaning back in his chair, "there's something familiar about you. You remind me of someone I used to know." My heart skipped a beat, though I kept my expression calm. Smiling gently, I replied softly, "Perhaps an old friend. Life has a curious way of reconnecting us, even indirectly." He chuckled softly, eyes reflective. "Maybe you're right. It's funny how certain connections feel like echoes from our past." Our conversations grew more frequent, transitioning naturally from casual literary chats to deeper reflections about life's challenges and triumphs. Daniel, sensing my genuine passion for storytelling, eventually invited me to participate in the bookstore's weekly reading group, where community members gathered to share poetry, prose, and personal stories. I hesitated briefly, but the sincerity in Daniel's invitation and my desire for genuine connection compelled me to accept. Each gathering at Bennett's Books became a treasured highlight of my week, a space filled with warmth, authenticity, and mutual respect. Through these readings, I found my voice strengthening, my confidence growing. One evening after a particularly moving session, Daniel approached with quiet sincerity. "Your readings always resonate deeply with me," he shared gently. "It's as if you're speaking truths I've needed to hear for a long time." His words touched my heart deeply. "We often find pieces of ourselves in others' stories," I replied softly, smiling gently. "Perhaps we're simply mirrors, reflecting what we need to see." Daniel regarded me thoughtfully, a warm smile playing at his lips. "You might be right about that. I'm grateful you found your way here, Margaret. You've become an important part of this community." Tears pricked the corners of my eyes at his heartfelt acknowledgement. I nodded quietly, profoundly moved, yet unable to fully express the depths of my gratitude and the silent truths still waiting patiently to be revealed. Walking home later beneath a sky painted with hues of twilight, I reflected on the gentle but powerful bond forming between Daniel and myself. Despite the unresolved truths still concealed within me, a profound sense of peace settled warmly in my heart. In Daniel, I'd found not only the son whose existence I'd only recently discovered, but also a kindred spirit, a beacon of authenticity and compassion who reminded me daily of life's quiet beauty and the possibility of redemption. With each step along Asheville's tranquil streets, my resolve strengthened. Someday soon, I would find the courage to fully reveal the truth. Until then, I cherished each moment spent quietly building trust and connection with Daniel, allowing our friendship to bloom naturally, nourished by sincerity and mutual respect. For now, this quiet joy was enough. The decision weighed heavily on my heart, yet the resolve that had carried me this far remained steadfast. In the quiet of Aunt Ruth's cottage, I picked up the phone and dialed my lawyer's number, my fingers trembling slightly. Our conversation was short, precise, and purposeful. By the time I hung up, I had set in motion events I knew would cause upheaval, but also necessary clarity. Days passed quietly as I waited, watching from afar as the truth gently nudged Alex and Hannah towards reality. Through messages relayed by my attorney, I learned that the couple initially dismissed the legal notice as some cruel misunderstanding. But denial soon gave way to panic, then to anger, and finally to desperate disbelief. Hannah, unaccustomed to being challenged, reacted furiously. She demanded proof of my ownership, unable to accept the undeniable fact that the Victorian home where she'd effortlessly played the gracious hostess was never truly theirs. Despite her protestations, every document, every signature, clearly reinforced my rights. The realization that their carefully crafted world had no solid ground beneath it sent ripples of distress through their lives. From a distance, I followed their unraveling, neither satisfied nor regretful, only deeply saddened by the necessity of such harsh lessons. The facade Hannah had meticulously maintained on social media cracked visibly, her confident posts replaced by vague, frantic messages about betrayal and injustice, yet unable to halt the quiet withdrawal of followers and sponsors. Alex's responses were more subdued but equally troubled. Desperate voicemails filled my phone, his voice trembling with confusion and remorse. Each message tugged at my heart, yet I stood firm, unwilling to interfere prematurely. This painful reckoning was essential, for both of them needed to learn the value of humility, truth, and accountability. One evening, drawn by a need to witness the consequences firsthand, I found myself parked unobtrusively down the street from the Victorian house, watching silently through the gathering dusk. Through softly illuminated windows, I saw Alex pacing anxiously in the living room, his phone pressed urgently to his ear, frustration etched deeply into his expression. Hannah stood rigidly nearby, her posture radiating tension and despair. Their quiet arguments, muffled by distance, spoke volumes nonetheless. I imagined their conversations frantic attempts to shift blame, desperate pleas for solutions that no longer existed. Each moment intensified my sadness, but also deepened my conviction. If they were to grow, they had to experience the very truths they'd so arrogantly disregarded. In the following days, news from my attorney confirmed their situation worsened rapidly. Unable to provide evidence of ownership or afford the necessary legal challenges, they faced eviction and the harsh judgment of their former social circle. Friends and acquaintances, drawn to Hannah's charisma and carefully cultivated image, drifted away as quickly as they'd once flocked to her. I kept careful, meticulous records of every development, noting the exact sequence of events with quiet precision. Each note was both a reflection of my determination and a testament to the heavy responsibility I felt in orchestrating their harsh but necessary lesson. Despite everything, I held no animosity. Instead, my heart ached for Alex's lost innocence and misguided choices. Yet I understood deeply he had allowed himself to become complicit in this superficial charade. Silence had become my greatest ally, enabling Alex to confront the consequences of his choices unshielded. As the eviction date approached, Alex's attempts to reach me intensified. Each voicemail grew more frantic, pleading for understanding, forgiveness, and guidance. Though it pained me greatly, I remained silent, firm in my conviction that this moment of accountability was necessary for true growth and reflection. One night, standing beneath a clear, starlit sky outside Aunt Ruth's cottage, I quietly considered the path forward. I had initiated this painful chapter not out of cruelty, but from profound love and unyielding belief that Alex could rediscover humility, compassion, and truth if faced directly with the consequences of deceit. In that quiet moment, under the vast expanse of stars, I felt a calm assurance that, though harsh, this first push toward reality was the most genuine expression of love I could offer. It was my hope that someday Alex might understand that truth, recognizing my silence as not abandonment, but rather an unwavering faith in his capacity to reclaim his integrity and find redemption. With resolve strengthened, I turned away from the dark silhouette of mountains against the night sky, returning to the gentle comfort of Aunt Ruth's home, knowing I had done what was necessary. I was prepared for whatever came next, my heart buoyed by quiet courage, steadfast conviction, and an enduring hope for the transformative power of truth. Autumn leaves carpeted the paths of Forsyth Park, their brilliant hues of orange and gold casting a warm glow in the fading afternoon sunlight. I chose this place deliberately, a neutral ground rich with memories from Alex's childhood, a fitting backdrop for the profound truth I was about to reveal. Sitting quietly on a weathered bench beneath the canopy of oak trees, I watched families stroll past, their laughter mingling softly with the gentle rustling of leaves. Soon, I saw Alex approach, his gait hesitant, shoulders slumped in weariness. He had aged visibly in these recent weeks, his youthful confidence replaced by vulnerability and uncertainty. My heart ached at the sight, yet I remained composed, determined to see this through. Alex reached me, stopping a few feet away. He glanced down, avoiding my gaze, hands nervously tucked into his pockets. "Hi, Mom," he murmured softly, his voice strained. "Hello, Alex," I responded gently, motioning for him to sit beside me. He hesitated briefly before settling onto the bench, the distance between us feeling both physical and emotional. Silence stretched momentarily, punctuated only by the gentle rustling of leaves and distant laughter of children at play. Finally, I reached into my purse and carefully handed him a thick envelope containing Ruth's letters, the hospital records, and detailed evidence about the painful truth I had uncovered. "There's something you need to know, Alex," I began softly, my voice calm yet firm. He opened the envelope cautiously, his eyes scanning the contents. As understanding dawned upon him, his face paled, hands trembling visibly as he read the documents. This can't be true," he stammered, eyes wide with disbelief and shock. "I don't understand." "It's true," I interrupted gently. "The hospital made a mistake when you were born. You were placed into my arms, into my care, but biologically, you aren't my child." Alex shook his head slowly, tears gathering in his eyes. "Mom, how could this be?" Aunt Ruth discovered it years later. She kept it hidden, hoping to spare us both this pain. I explained softly, reaching out gently to touch his hand. But when I found her letters, I had to face this truth myself. I've always loved you, Alex, as deeply and fiercely as if you were my own. But the distance between us, the misunderstandings, perhaps now they make more sense. Alex buried his face in his hands, shoulders shaking silently as tears overwhelmed him. "Mom, I'm so sorry," he choked out, voice heavy with regret and remorse. "I've been so selfish, so blind." I gently placed my hand on his shoulder, feeling the tremors of his grief. "I don't blame you, Alex. I never did," I reassured softly. "But I cannot bear the weight of silence and misunderstandings any longer. You needed to know." He looked up at me through tear-filled eyes, pleading desperately for forgiveness. "I've hurt you so badly. Can you ever forgive me?" My heart softened, filled with compassion for the young man I'd raised, the child I'd nurtured through every scraped knee, every heartbreak. "Of course I forgive you, Alex. But forgiveness doesn't erase pain, and it doesn't always mean returning to what was. I can't keep enduring this cycle. I need to heal too." He nodded slowly, absorbing my words, recognizing their painful truth. We sat quietly, side by side, sharing an unspoken grief, mourning the loss of what we had both believed to be true. Around us, life continued its gentle rhythm, unaware of the silent revolution unfolding between mother and son. As the sun dipped lower in the sky, casting long shadows across the park, Alex finally stood, wiping tears from his cheeks. "What happens now?" he asked softly, uncertainty lingering in his voice. "We both take time to heal," I answered gently, rising slowly from the bench. "We find our truths and learn to live honestly with them. Perhaps someday we'll find our way back to each other in a new, healthier way." Alex embraced me suddenly, fiercely, as if afraid to let go. I returned his hug warmly, feeling the weight of years dissolve briefly in that moment of shared sorrow and love. Then, stepping back, he gave me a fragile, bittersweet smile. "I love you, Mom. I always have." "I know, Alex," I whispered softly, my voice thick with emotion. "And I have always loved you." He walked away slowly, shoulders still heavy but posture subtly straighter, as if some burden had been partially lifted. Alone again on the bench, I felt a profound quiet settle within me, mingled with grief, relief, and hope. As twilight descended upon Forsyth Park, cloaking everything in gentle shades of purple and indigo, I finally understood that truth, painful though it was, had set us both free. And perhaps, in this painful yet honest reckoning, Alex and I could each find the path toward genuine healing, redemption, and peace. The sun filtered softly through the back windows of Bennett's books, casting a warm golden hue over the wooden floorboards and the quiet shelves. It was late afternoon, the quietest hour of the day, and Daniel had just finished arranging a new display of memoirs near the reading nook. I stood by the threshold of the small office in the back, my heart pounding gently but rhythmically, like a clock finally ready to strike. He looked up from his task and smiled. "Margaret, come in. I was just about to make tea." "Thank you," I said, stepping into the room with deliberate calm. I carried with me a manila folder, the corner slightly worn from being handled too often. I had rehearsed this moment countless times in my head, always wondering if there was a perfect way to begin. But I knew now that perfect didn't exist, only truth did. We sat across from each other, the scent of bergamot rising from the cups between us. I took a slow sip, letting the silence settle before gently placing the folder on the table. "I need to tell you something," I began, looking directly into Daniel's kind, steady eyes. "Something that will change the way you see me, and perhaps the way you see your own story." He tilted his head slightly, curiosity tempered by respect. I opened the folder and began to speak, not rushed, not dramatic, just honest. I told him about Ruth, about the letters, about the switch at the hospital, about how I had raised Alex, never knowing he was not my biological son, and how, after all these years, I had found Daniel, my true son, here, running a bookstore filled with the very stories that had always brought me comfort. Daniel listened in stillness. He did not interrupt. His expression shifted only slightly. Surprise, confusion, a flicker of doubt, but mostly quiet awe. When I finished, he leaned back slowly in his chair, exhaling through pursed lips. "That's a lot," he said, voice low and steady. "I don't know what to say." "I understand," I replied, my fingers clasped gently in my lap. "I didn't come here expecting anything. Not an instant connection. Not an apology from the universe. I needed you to know, because the truth belongs to you as much as it belongs to me." He stared down at the table for a long moment, then back up at me. "I always wondered," he said softly. "I was adopted, you know. My parents told me when I was 13. They were wonderful to me, but I always felt this space, this blank page at the beginning of my story. A tightness I hadn't realized I was holding eased gently in my chest. I'm not here to take anything away from them," I said quickly, "or to rewrite your past. If there's a chance we could know each other, I would cherish it." Daniel gave a slow, thoughtful nod. He looked older in that moment, not in years, but in depth, as if a new layer of himself had surfaced. "We can start from here," he said. "We can go slow. You don't have to be mom right away, and I don't have to be anyone but who I am right now. But we can start." Tears welled in my eyes, not from sadness, but from the tenderness of the offer. "That's more than enough," I whispered. He smiled then, a quiet, genuine smile that reminded me, strangely and without explanation, of a moment long ago when I first held Alex in my arms and thought I had found home. And here, with Daniel, I felt that sense again, not as a correction of the past, but as the beginning of something new and real. "I host a poetry night here on Thursdays," Daniel said, glancing at the shelves. "Maybe you'd like to read something sometime?" I laughed gently. "Only if you promise not to critique my metaphors." He grinned. "Deal." We sipped our tea in peaceful silence, the sunlight slowly dimming into a soft, golden twilight. In that quiet room filled with books and the scent of tea leaves, a seed of something delicate and rare was planted. As I stood to leave, Daniel walked me to the door. Just as I stepped out into the cool air, he paused. "Margaret," he said, and I turned. He looked at me with steady, open eyes. "We have the rest of our lives to get to know each other, right?" I smiled, blinking back the tears. "Yes, we do." And for the first time in a long while, I walked home with my heart wide open, not weighed down by the past, but lifted by the quiet, patient hope of what might come next. Autumn settled gently over Savannah like an old quilt, warm and comforting, stitched with memories of years past. The decision to let go of the Victorian house did not come lightly, but when it did, it came with clarity. That house had once been my sanctuary, then my prison, and now it would become a doorway for others. With the help of my lawyer, the sale was finalized in late October. The market had been kind, and the proceeds were more than I expected. I made my plans quietly, with little ceremony, no announcements, no grand gestures. Just a wire transfer to a nonprofit in Asheville that helped older women start their own businesses, women who, like me, had given everything to others and now wished to reclaim a piece of themselves. It felt like breathing again after a long-held breath. Weeks later, Daniel invited me back to the bookstore for what he called a small surprise. I arrived in the early evening, the shop quiet and golden under its warm lights. Daniel greeted me with a hug and led me toward the back, past the poetry corner and the staff office, to a door I hadn't noticed before. He handed me a small brass key. "I've been working on this," he said, voice calm but eyes twinkling. "It's not much, but I thought you might like to see it." He opened the door, revealing a softly lit room, newly painted in muted creams and warm browns. A few cozy armchairs, a reading lamp, shelves lined with blank journals and well-loved classics, a kettle in the corner next to a stack of teacups. A chalkboard on the far wall read in careful script, "The next chapter." "I thought you could run this space," Daniel said. "Not as staff, of course, unless you want to, but as yourself. For storytelling circles, memoir writing, tea and talk nights, whatever you like. A place where women can come and speak their truths, or just sit quietly with a book. It's yours." I stood still, overwhelmed. Of all the keys I'd ever handed away, house keys, car keys, keys to my independence, this was the first time someone had given one back. A key that didn't lock me into duty or expectation, a key that opened something new. Daniel placed the brass key in my hand and closed my fingers gently around it. "I figured it's time someone handed you the door for once." Tears brimmed in my eyes. I didn't speak for a moment, just looked around the room that already felt like a reflection of something I had long carried inside me. We spent the next hour talking about ideas. A Saturday circle for widowed women, a shelf of books written by women over 60, a series called Letters to Our Younger Selves. The space would not be grand, but it would be real, and real was enough. Later that night, back in my little cottage, I sat down at the desk with my worn leather notebook, the one that had traveled with me through silence, grief, and discovery. I turned to a fresh page and wrote slowly, carefully. "This life. Sometimes to find yourself, you must abandon the role you've been performing and walk, trembling, into your own light." I closed the notebook and looked out the window. The sky was deepening into twilight, the edges of the world soft and forgiving. Somewhere down the road, I would share my story. I would open the door, pour the tea, and make space for other women to speak. And maybe, just maybe, they too would find their next chapter inside the warmth of a small room, beneath the quiet hum of a bookstore, holding a key not to someone else's life, but to their own. We all carry stories tucked away in the quiet corners of our lives, some whispered only to the mirror, some locked behind silence and time. But there comes a moment, if we're lucky, when the door creaks open and we find the courage to speak. My story may be just one thread in a larger tapestry, but if it has reached you, stirred something in your heart, then perhaps it's done its part. Maybe you've sat at a dinner table where you felt invisible. Maybe you've walked away from a house that no longer felt like home. Or maybe you're just now beginning to wonder who you are outside the roles you've played. Whatever your journey, I want you to remember this. It is never too late to turn the page. It is never too late to write the next chapter on your own terms, in your own voice. And if this story has resonated with you in any way, I hope you'll take a moment to reflect on your own, write it down, share it with someone, whisper it into a safe space. Your story matters more than you know. If you'd like to hear more stories like this of women who've weathered storms, reclaimed their names, and quietly changed the course of their lives, please consider liking this video, sharing it with someone who needs it, and subscribing to Grandma's Final Chapter. Every voice you help us reach is a door opened, a silence broken. Thank you for spending this time with me. Until next time, take gentle care of yourself. The next chapter is waiting, and this time, you hold the key.